What happens after we failed Jesus? Can God still use us? Welcome to Your Week with St. Luke's, your weekly podcast from St. Luke's United Methodist Church in Orlando that invites you to go deeper with Scripture, to learn God's story so that together we can live, love, and lead a life following Jesus to awaken disciples and reveal the kingdom. We're wrapping up our time in the Commons during Eastertide, a space where we've been remembering what it means to be a resurrected community, walking with one another in faith and going out into the world in mission. This week, we close out on John chapter 21 with one of the most personal moments in all of the resurrection stories. Jesus and Peter, one-on-one. 3 questions, 3 answers, and a restored call to lead, to love, and to invite others in. Peter's story doesn't end at his failure. It ends with a commission, and so does ours. Today, you'll hear a conversation between Pastors Corey and Melissa as they reflect on this passage together. Let's jump right in.
Hi, friends. It is so good to be with you. This is Pastor Melissa and Pastor Corey on Your Week with St. Luke's, and we are so excited to continue our series of Love University in the Commons, looking at what it means to be community, to live out our faith, and for us to, ask that question of what is it that God is asking of us as we are sent out as resurrection people. So.
All right, we're going to get started with the text. We are still in John 21. I'm going to read verses 15 through 19. It says, when they finished eating, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Simon replied, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my lambs. Jesus asked the second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Simon replied, yes, Lord, you know I love you. Jesus said to him, take care of my sheep. He asked a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter was sad that Jesus asked him a third time, do you love me? He replied, Lord, you know all things, you know everything. You know I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. I assure you that when you were younger, you tied your own belt and walked around wherever you wanted. When you grow old, you will stretch out your hand and another will tie your belt and lead you where you don't want to go. He said this to show the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. After saying this, Jesus said to Peter, follow me. So this week we are still the Commons, the student section on campus. But with today's question or today's passage, we see, I think, what is one of the most profound moments in Peter's life and in the Gospels. The person that becomes a leader of the church, being brought back into the fold, if you will, through this meal, through this breakfast, and through these words. And so it's a word of hope for all of us in times like this. And so, yeah, today is what happens after failure and when we come face to face with Jesus again. So.
Well, and Peter is we've done Holy Weeks where our whole Holy Week was focused on Peter. Like we just followed his story throughout because we get more of Peter consistently in all of our Gospels, in this part of the story, I think. We know there are 12 disciples and all of that, but we just see a lot more of Peter, don't we? And so getting to see this really intimate moment between Jesus and Peter is really, really interesting, and particularly Peter with kind of his tail between his legs after a pretty rough go of it throughout the night of the crucifixion and going into all of that.
Well, I think it's interesting what he calls him, right? He says Simon,
Mm-hmm.
son of John, and he doesn't call him Peter,
Yeah.
the rock. He calls him by his original name. And so, why do you think Jesus uses Peter's old name?
It's interesting because the thing that I noticed as you were reading the text was where we end, which is follow me. which is also where we begin earlier in the gospel of Jesus asking, all of these different people to follow him. And so I just see, because we land there, it harkens back to a renewal of calling, a reminder of why you're here to begin with, and reminding, Peter kind of where he came from and where this all started. And I think when I think about, our own, when we need to refocus, when we have gotten off track and we have, gone away from our values or realized that we have gone down paths that we wish we hadn't. It's those moments and those people that remind us of kind of the core of who we are. And I think that's not just in a name, but in the last time that name would have been used would have been around his calling and Jesus inviting him to follow him the first time. So I see that kind of thread that starts to emerge.
Mhm. Yeah, it's kind of gives that, Corey Antoine Jones, when they use your full name, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and it's interesting if Jesus is reinstating him, forgiving him, and reinstating him,
Hmm.
it makes sense that he wouldn't use the name that he gave him after he called him the first time.
Yeah.
He can't be called from that position of already being
Hmm.
called. He takes him back to prior to the initial follow me and almost starts over to say, hey, it is okay. It is okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think
uh,
of like when we remember our baptism every year of let's go back to kind of the beginning. Let's go back to what the core identity of who we are is. Yeah.
and it's interesting that we don't see or really hear about what's happening with the other disciples right now, and that Jesus makes it one-on-one.
Hmm.
And we hear it in culture, right? In church, you have a come to Jesus talk.
Yes.
And typically, when we hear that, it's in a way that we're getting ready to be either judged or there's going to be some kind of hard truth.
Hmm.
But this come to Jesus talk, it's all about refocusing, it's all about extending grace, it's all about reminding him why he was called in the first place. Because I do know that you love me, and
Yeah.
because of that I do want you to still go and feed my sheep. And
Yeah.
here, the come to Jesus talk is one about grace and mercy and repurposing and reassurance, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And
that
he doesn't need to call him out. Peter
right,
knows, right? Jesus knows that he does not need to, twist the knife any harder. That your Peter is already feeling guilty. Peter is already feeling that lack of self, that loss of self for himself. And so this come to Jesus is not about shame or blame. It's about grace and reclaiming. And we would say probably that Jesus would never have seen him as unclaimed, right? But it's Jesus helping Peter to feel that for himself and to, in some ways, ritualize the re-entry into his calling, the re-entry into the community with Jesus there.
yes, we talked about in worship when we talked about forgiveness, that pronunciation is more so pronouncing
Yeah,
is for us, right?
yeah,
The Lord's already done the work. Well, and I love how he doesn't avoid the conversation.
right.
Jesus shows up, offers the breakfast, and it's like, hey, let's have this conversation, knowing,
Hmm.
yes, that the mission of the church needed it, but also, as you're saying, Peter's own spirit
Yeah.
needed it. So yeah, I
it's
love
it's
how
it's being seen, right? It's Jesus, by approaching him in this way, Peter feels seen. And there's still a sting to it. He's probably still got some guilt and some shame he's going to have to work through, probably for the rest of his life, because of what he knows transpired. But Jesus making sure that he knows that that is not coming from outside. That's not coming from God. That's not coming from him. That's coming from within his humanity in the midst of that. And we get that conflict resolution process in the Gospel of Matthew, where it talks about, come to someone one on one, talk about it there. So Jesus is kind of naming that right here as well.
Mhm. It's interesting that in the naming that Jesus at no point says, Peter, I love you.
Mm,
It's almost like that is known. That is,
mm-hmm.
but Peter, do you love me? And
Yeah.
and if so, right, go live into that love. Go feed my sheep. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so I wonder, what Peter's feeling in this moment, right? Is he frustrated? Is he relieved? After the third time, he asks, Lord, you know all things. Um, and of course, we recognize that Jesus asking him three times parallels or calls back to Peter denying him three times. It was
Right.
almost as if, for Peter's own sake, he needed to say it three times to negate,
Right.
right? What do they say? You need seven good impressions to make up for the first bad one, right? At
Yeah.
least here it's even, three and three. Three denials,
Yeah.
three chances to say, to remind even yourself that you do love me.
Mm-hmm.
That those
Mm-hmm.
denials did not deny your love for me.
Yeah.
And
I love again, it's showing us this sort of power of ritual. Ritualism is problematic. We can get into the, repeating something over and over and doing it just out of rote. But there's reasons that we have rituals in the church. There's reasons that we ritualize important moments, whether that is baptism or confirmation, whether that is, Eucharist, whether that is commissioning, whatever it might be, saying the Lord's Prayer every week. There is something about the repetition of and having that concrete moment to do that. Because I think about, you said, what is Peter feeling? I think about that, like how much it throws you off when you think somebody's about to let into you.
Mhm.
Like you're as a kid, you're waiting for, your parents are just gonna like just completely, you're in big hot water, right? And then they don't. um that's almost sometimes worse feeling in that moment than getting just reamed out, because you've been preparing for that. You've been, girding yourself for having that sort of lash out at you. And I'm positive it took him aback that Jesus went this direction in something that, in some ways might feel out of the blue or off topic. But Jesus knowing that that was what he needed in that moment, and setting him, off on his heels a little bit, was part of that process, surprising him with what that answer would be.
Prodigal son, Father, I have sinned against
Yeah,
heaven and against you. I'm no longer, but before he could go into his spiel that he had practiced, right? Quick, bring the robe, put it on him, put the ring.
yeah.
Yes, totally. Yeah, that's good. Totally shocked him. And,
Mm-hmm.
I've had those times in my life where I thought my parents probably would, respond in a certain way. But they responded more with the depth of love for me, as they saw the bigger picture.
Yeah,
Um, well, that's what we see here, right? Jesus, of course, knows the bigger picture and the role that Peter can and still will play in the ancient church. And um, what's interesting, as Peter is responding, he doesn't just say, especially the third time, I love you, but Lord, you know I love you. Uh,
mm-hmm.
almost wanting Jesus and his knowledge to even reassure Peter, like
Yeah,
I know I love, but Lord, test my heart, right? I almost
yeah.
the psalmist, Lord, search me and know my heart. You know
Mm-hmm.
I love you, and don't allow the times that I have messed up or failed
Yeah.
to be a louder indication of what you know to be true, right?
Yeah, one of the things that will cut me to the core is my integrity being questioned, right? I'm not going to say that I live out of it all the time. I'm not going to say that I, act in all of the ways that I wish I would, but ultimately my hope is that if you know me, you know that at my core, I mean well and I have these values and I stand on this, even if my actions don't always match that. And to criticize action is one thing, but to criticize the person, that cuts deeper. And so I think that's what you're getting to, is like that you know me, I love you, you surely you know the depths of who I am, and that didn't represent who I really am and what I really believe and what my real values are. Yeah, I align with that so much.
I
Yeah.
think many of us do, right? Whether in the church or on the job or when we mess up, there are times that we have to live our lives and we're completely exhausted, right? And so maybe we're not at our our best self.
Hmm.
What's interesting that of all the disciples that he was the one that ends up leaving the church. And so what's that say about how failure shapes the way that we express?
Yeah. 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 Well, and that's it. His response, when Jesus responds, like you said, he doesn't say, "I love you" back. He's like, "Okay, if that's true, then go care for my sheep, care for my people." And to think of, in that moment again, Peter may be thinking shame, blame, guilt, all of that, and instead he gets a new commission. He gets a new calling. Again, not what he would have expected in that moment, too.
Well, he's living out what we see in Luke 7, right? Therefore, I tell you, who has many sins have been forgiven,
Hmm.
they,
Yeah.
love much. So
Yeah. And
he,
Jesus knows he'll be better for people and hopefully offer this kind of grace because he has received it, right? To be able to do that. But, I think about, there's a group of folks at St. Luke's who have had, really hard experiences with the church, have been hurt by the church. And when I was looking for a connection point for them of people who might be able to help them and to lead them and to work with them, I looked for somebody else who'd been hurt by the church, because if you understand that, you can be there for them in that way. And seeing how that, matches up. We talk about with youth, in your teenage and 20 something years, it's a season of doubt and challenge and, wondering and pushing back and questioning beliefs. And the best thing you can give a youth is somebody who has doubted and who has questioned and who has, not walked what we think of as the straight and narrow, their whole lives. So it makes sense ultimately, in the bigger picture, but in that moment maybe feels a little off.
well, those that Peter would have been in ministry to and with, of course, we hear a story of welcoming Gentiles, Acts 10. And also to the rest of us that would become
Yeah,
followers, that if the supposedly first pope, right, uh,
yeah,
right, we can point to him and say, well, I mean, he literally denied knowing the Lord.
yeah.
Uh, and he was not only brought back into the fold, he still held his position
Mhm.
in sharing the gospel and how to do this. So that continues to speak volumes to us that walk this line, loving the Lord and may mess up. Um, and so I love how Jesus not only makes a suggestion, right? Do you love me? Well, if you love me, feed my lambs. So
Mhm.
those are commands.
Yeah.
Those are commands. Tend my sheep, feed my sheep. Um, Immediately, he connects love with purpose. and
Hmm.
responsibility. If you love me, then do this. Um, I mean, if that's not ecclesiology, then
Right.
I mean, for the church, if you love me, if you recognize me as your Lord, then
Hmm.
care of one another, take care of those around you. That's the
Yeah.
mission of the church.
And
Uh,
it's not optional. It is a direct, right? It is a direct if then. I'm sure
yep.
somebody who does like math and things like that there's a name for something like that, right? But it is a direct if this, then this.
Yes.
And I think if not this, then you need to question the if, right? And for us to recognize that action and care and concern for the world and we could go on a whole other podcast about what feed my lambs and tend my sheep could mean, right? But to be able to recognize that to say we love God requires something of us, requires us to then act in some way, and to act not just for ourselves, but for others, because, my lambs and my sheep, God's people, all people. And so we get that immediate, okay, if this is true, then this has to be how you respond.
Mhm. Amen. Do you think there was any hesitation on Jesus' part to trust Peter?
That's a great question. And it's a tough one because, I mean, you want to go, no, he's God. He knows all the things. And he's also human.
Mhm.
And if we believe Jesus was fully human, then there's no way that knowledge of Peter's denial couldn't have stung a little bit.
Yeah.
And so I imagine that the work of approaching that moment, Jesus' humanity had to wrestle with some of that. I hope so. I like I know some people like the idea of Jesus, never questioning and never wrestling and never, pushing back. But I like to know that part of why Jesus is such a central figure is the incarnational element, that he became and walked and felt and thought and did the things that we have done. And so for me to know that he also struggles with forgiveness sometimes, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, to walk with somebody for 3 years and them claim to be, because the first question is, do you love me more than these?
Right.
And so that's been Peter's claim these 3 years, is that he's loved Jesus more than the rest. And to be betrayed by that person
Hmm.
would sting. And so um, I think I believe that Jesus trusted in Peter's uh, deep desire to want to rectify what he had done wrong, right?
Yeah.
For denying that he knew his friend, his Lord, his Savior. So I think Lord trusted in that, and really it made Peter bolder for the
Yeah.
gospel. It made him bolder for the gospel, and it took what is offered and appropriated to the whole world. It made it real for him. It
Yeah.
wasn't that he just followed Jesus these 3 years. It's that he sit and also tasted the deep goodness of restoration and forgiveness. So yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
That is powerful. And I think it's going to be really powerful for us to come around this story together on Sunday in worship, to be able to kind of wrestle with that ourselves and to see what it looks like for us to be a community. Right? I mean, we've had this theme in a couple of weeks of that community of love and forgiveness that comes from our baptismal vow. And I think we see a whole other manifestation of that in this particular week. So join us on Sunday. Be sure to be there as we continue down this path and to look at what it means to follow Jesus even when we get it wrong, and to know that we've received that grace. So we'll see you on Sunday.
See you then. Peace.